the reason I wanted to do this mini compliance webinar is because a lot of things have come up in the last couple of months that I thought it was really important to let everybody know about. And I didn't think it was a good idea to wait a whole year before we discussed it, because there's been some serious complaints coming in. So prior to starting, I always give a little wolf trivia. The wolf trivia for the day is that wolves' eyes are gold, not brown, blue, or black. And so that's one way to kind of tell if a wolf dog has high content or low content, as you look at those beautiful gold eyes. Disclaimer, as usual, nothing in this presentation is intended to be or should be taken as legal or tax advice, and the information contained herein is generally informative in nature and does not necessarily apply to any specific situation or legal need. Attendance here does not create an attorney-client relationship nor an expectation of confidentiality regarding anything you may disclose to moi during this presentation. Okay, so recently I've gotten a bunch of complaints that have come in. I had one person in particular who had 4 complaints against them, and that kind of was really shocking to me. So that's really why I wanted to do this. And then I had another one come in recently that had some issues in that I've been nagging people about for 2 years. And here's an example of it. So first, the first 4 are all kind of in the same bucket. Unqualified staff person performing medical procedures. We know that nobody who is not licensed provider can be performing medical procedures. It happens, and it's really tragic because they can really hurt patients. Business owned by a layperson renting an MD license. Layperson borrows MD license. RN owns the practice. So those 4 things all fall into that one bucket of the public, and the investigator in this case didn't understand who owned the practice. And why didn't they? Because it wasn't obvious when they looked at the practice, and it wasn't obvious when they spoke to the staff in the practice who owns the practice. We're going to get to that in a minute. You've heard me yammer on about this for a year or more, so here I am yammering again. So here's the shocking thing that happened. RN represents through social media that she practices independently, no identification of a practice. RN misrepresents her identity on social media and website, uses a name other than that under which she has her license. So those 2 are specifically associated with social media and public image, and we'll talk about that. And then these are kind of random. An RN continued to administer treatment after adverse side effects. And yeah.
Would it be okay if I took a photo of this to send to my nurses at Portrait, or would you rather?
Yeah, you can. And actually, I'm going to send you the recording.
Oh, okay.
In a couple of days, and you can send it to whoever you want.
Okay.
Okay. And failure to properly chart. And I talked about the charting last time, but I just wanted to bring it up again because it kind of goes in this category. And it did cost someone many thousands of dollars recently. If you didn't see the last webinar, I talked about that. And it was really tragic. Okay, so who can perform medical procedures? A licensed MD or DO? A licensed person such as in our world, an RN, PA, or an NP who is supervised by a licensed MD or DO. And these providers must be employed, W-2 employed by a medical practice. Now, I did mention that there is one exception to this where the providers are employed by the medical practice, but it's very obscure. It doesn't apply to anyone except one person I know. And I'm not going to go into that because nobody else will deal with that. So in California, medical practice is a physician operating as a sole proprietor, or a medical partnership of physicians, or of medical corporations, or a medical corporation. And in most of our universe here in the med spa world, it's this, a medical corporation. And we know it must be at least 51% owned by an MD. Now my dog is barking. This always happens. Gracie, come outside. If you want to go outside, go in the back. Come here. This is what happens when I record these at home, which I normally do. Go out here. So must be 51% owned by an MD or DO. The other 49% may be owned by an RNPA, NP, Doctor of Chiropractic, and some others, but in our universe, it's these. The 49% may not be split between or among more than one non-MD or DO. The reason for this is because under California law, the shareholders of a corporation, of a professional corporation, shall be the directors. Each director has one vote. A medical or professional corporation must be controlled by that licensed person. So must be controlled by an MD. So if you've got one MD who owns, or DO who owns 51%, and you've got an RN and an NP who split the other 49%, now you've got these three directors, and the two non-MDs can outvote that MD or DO. That's a no-no. So that's why, and people have tried to do this, and it's really interesting how I researched this, but the bottom line is that that's a big no-no. And the directors should not be outside persons who are not shareholders, the officers and directors as well, in these professional corporations. So now we know what a medical practice is and how providers are associated with that medical practice. Let's go to the next issue, which is the violations of the Nursing Practice Act and the Business and Professions Code. So misrepresenting who you are as a provider on social media is fraud. So if you don't use your name that is on your license, you use some pseudonym, stage name, your first and middle name, that is fraud. The public must know who you are. So if they want to look up your license, they can go right to that nursing board website and look up your license. A lot of these naming issues, we have the FNPs and the DBAs and the trademarks and all this. There are different reasons for how these labels and licenses and names are set up. But one of the primary reasons is it's a pathway for the public to know where the buck stops and who the person is who's ultimately responsible for that particular license. Fraud and unsupervised practice of medicine arise when a non-MD, let's say RNPA or an NP, represents on social media or a website that they're practicing independently of an MD or DO. Now, many of you have heard me nag and yammer about, and I've had long, multiple conversations with people, there they are now barking, about how to represent yourself on your website and on your social media. You must have the name of the practice there and the medical director's name anywhere where you are displaying your medical services treatment to the public. Failure to chart, we talked about that last time. This is a violation of the Business and Profession Code. And of course, treating a patient who's had an adverse event from that type of treatment is just ludicrous. I have a feeling that that issue in this particular complaint is not true, but it's probably what brought that complaint to light. And it was probably an unhappy patient who complained to the nursing board, and that was part of her story. And, why are these complaints so common? Because there are only two ways for a patient to obtain a legal remedy for some kind of problem with medical treatment. One is suing, right? Malpractice complaint. Doctors have a great lobby, and they have lobbied for really tight restrictions on malpractice complaints. There are very tight timelines, and there's a cap on the amount of money that an attorney can make, the amount of percentage that they can earn on a contingency fee in a medical malpractice case. And nobody's going to pay an attorney for a malpractice case. They're all done on contingency, like personal injury and these other torts. Because of that, if the injury is not a high dollar injury, no attorney is going to take it. So they're very hard to bring these malpractice complaints for aesthetic injuries, because what you all do in the aesthetics world normally does not injure a patient if something goes wrong. You know, you've got swelling in the lips or maybe a little laser burn between the brows, which is going to go away. These are not high dollar value injuries, so they're not going to go to the malpractice arena in the civil courts. So the patients are left with another recourse, and that is going to one of the boards, which is why they do it. So they go to the med board, the nursing board, the DO board, whoever, you know, whatever the license is. So what do we do to protect ourselves? Well, we're going to talk about this identity of the practice first, those first 4 complaint items that I had in that earlier slide. And I talked about this last time. The MD's picture should be in the entry area of the clinic, whether you've got 1 room or 5 rooms. Beautiful picture, Jane Smith, MD, medical director, should be in that when those patients walk in, and more importantly, when that investigator walks in. All staff knows and states, verbalizes that the clinic is a medical practice owned by Dr. Smith, and Dr. Smith is the medical director. Even though Dr. Smith might only come in once a month, the staff must be able to articulate to anyone who walks in the door, oh, whose business is this? You know, oh, this is Lori, the esthetician's business. No, Lori owns the MSO. This is Dr. Smith's practice. So everybody needs to know that. And that's where it arises, because these investigators will come in and they'll secret shop, as I've said before, and they'll make an appointment and see how you do your GFEs, and they'll start talking to the receptionist. And if that receptionist says, oh yeah, this is Lori's, you know, business and not even practice, they know that, you know, that gets their little nose a twitching. And how many times have I said this? Say patients, not clients. All of you have heard me say this, and I've corrected you. Say patients, not clients. It's how we verbalize these things that will allay suspicion when the investigators come in. All social media, as I said earlier, must list the practice name in the, you know, upper bio. Most people are doing Instagram, and you know, up in the top of the Instagram, it should say, you know, it can say, you know, whoever the nurse is, but it must say, you know, Jane Smith's Beauty Clinic, or whatever the name of the practice is, and Jane Smith Medical Director must say that up there, and that must be on the website. Just like you want that beautiful glossy picture of your doctor in your clinic when patients walk in, you should have a section of your website, you know, our team or practitioners or about us or whatever it is, and you should have first picture should be Dr. Smith's beautiful face, Dr. Jane Smith, medical director, and then, you know, who else, you know, are the rest of the team. Yeah, so that's all that stuff, right? Must list practice, link to practice, social media, must list medical director, website should have pictures and bios of the team, specifically medical director. Because I have had investigators say to me, yeah, and her website doesn't even list a doctor and it only has her name on it. That's a big no-no. So protective measures on the other issues, stay on top of charting. We want to chart every visit and even make notes for every phone call, even if you don't touch the patient. Make sure you're recording the serial numbers of those vials. In the old days, you just took the sticker on your hand. Now everything's electronic. You could still put it on your hand and type it in. Make sure those serial numbers, the volume of product you used on the patient, everything about that treatment. More detail is better than less. Take your time, because it can cost you thousands of dollars if you don't. Use only your legal name that is on your license in your marketing. When you're presenting yourself to the world, only your name, your actual legal name. Like my name is Deborah Serene Scheffler, and I've used a variety of names, you know, in my other hobbies, dancing and that. And I used Deborah Serene even when I was a personal trainer for a long time, and it was on my driver's license. But on my law license, and when I, you know, market myself as an attorney, it's always Deborah Scheffler. And you all should be doing the same thing. And just remember, the reason that the task force for safe medicine exists, and the reason these investigations are so prevalent, is because this is a, you know, revenue producing area of practice. And that's why we are in this business. But we must, in our mission statement, make patient care the top priority. It can never be revenue over patient care. And that's why, there was proposed legislation to get rid of MSOs, because these bigger hospitals have these MSOs that are publicly traded and the shareholders, and they're worried about share value. And then patient care takes a back seat to that, concern with revenue. Same thing happens here. If we're treating someone who the treatment is contraindicated or they've had a reaction to the treatment, if we're treating someone who has red flags, like they complained about their last practitioner, and I talk about this, like I have nothing against psych meds, but if you know that somebody's on multiple psych meds, think it through and consider the risk before you treat them, because we're emotional about our faces and people get very emotional about aesthetic treatments. So we want to make sure that we don't put money ahead of patient care. And then the last thing I just want to say is how injectors and nurses are paid, and nobody can earn a commission for medical services. And that's actually on the nursing board website. Nurses can get bonuses. And I've talked recently with a few of my practices about putting together bonus plans where you have activities that don't directly relate to revenue production in the bonus scenario. Like, for instance, no absences or no coming in late for a month. You get great Yelp reviews from a particular patient, that kind of thing. We don't text patients. We don't respond to Yelp reviews. We don't identify that a patient has been seen by us in a Yelp review. These are all HIPAA violations. And I think that's really all I wanted to talk about. Let's see if there's another slide. I don't think so. Nope, that's the end. There's my little wolf with his end and the little caudal gland right there, which is another scent gland that wolves have. So any questions? Yeah, I think you're the only one here. Yes.
A topic for a future webinar would be how to break up with a patient, or when I have a patient who I think is a danger to inject, how I legally do that or refer her to a psych without getting my ass in trouble.
Yeah, that, and I'll just talk about that briefly. You can just say, this is not an appropriate procedure for you, and you don't have to give them a reason why. But if you are going to terminate treatment on a patient, there is a very specific procedure that has to be followed. That I have the statutory letter, and it has to be sent certified mail. And in that letter, you have to refer them to 2 other practices in the area, in the geographic area. If anyone ever has that situation come up, and some of you who are going to see this recording have, and we've gone through this before, and it has to be sent also by the doctor, not by the RN. It must be signed by the MD. So yeah, there's a really specific procedure for doing that. And, and I've talked to many people about this as well. If a patient has a complaint and you're giving them a refund, if they have an issue that you think might be a reportable issue, or you think they might go to the board, even if after you've given the refund, get a settlement and release letter. I have them. I don't like to give a template on that. I've tried to put one together, but each situation is so nuanced that I don't want clients just, filling in blanks and giving these letters out, because it's a legal protection for you. And it says they're not going to report you to the board if you give them their money back. And they're also not going to sue you if you give them their money back. So that's how we handle those kind of situations. As far as referring someone to a psych, I don't think that's your place. And I think that could probably, cause more friction. But I do think you can say, you're not a good candidate for this procedure, and, under our protocols. And that's it,
Okay.
The doctor reviewed it and says, you're not a good candidate for this procedure.
Okay. Other question. I did not realize that I am breaking HIPAA if I acknowledge that I've seen a patient in a response to a review. So you're maybe like, I don't know, like third person or.
You can say, you can be general, like we love when our patients, we try to take the best care of all of our patients.
Okay. Should
Something
I,
like that,
I've only gotten a handful of reviews. I just started doing that. Should I don't think I can go in and change them or correct them.
if
I
you
will.
can. See if you
Okay.
can. And it mostly comes up if there's a negative review.
Okay.
And you say, well, when you came in, you told me this, and you can't say any of that stuff.
Okay.
In other businesses you can do that, but not in this industry.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Is that it?
Good job.
Have a good night. This will be recorded. It'll go out to everybody.
Thank you.
And the next one will probably be on the NP legislation for independence for NPs. I've been saying I'm going to do that for months, and I really need to get that because now it's 2022. We have one more year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good night.